What happens when the most powerful man in America decides to target a rising political star who refuses to back down? When threats of arrest meet defiant resistance? When a young politician from Queens stands up to the President of the United States and delivers a response so powerful it sends shockwaves through the political establishment? This is the story of how Zohran Mamdani, a 33-year-old Democratic socialist from New York, just became the unlikely hero who stood toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and delivered a comeback that left the political world stunned, social media exploding, and America asking, who is this guy and how did he just do that? But to understand why this moment was so explosive, so significant, and so absolutely devastating, we need to go back to the beginning and understand exactly who these two men are and why their collision was inevitable. Donald Trump needs no introduction. The 45th president, now the 47th president, returned to the White House in January 2025 after one of the most contentious elections in American history. Known for his Twitter wars, his ability to dominate news cycles, and his particular talent for turning political opponents into household names through relentless attacks, Trump's playbook is well established. Identify a target, give them a nickname, attack relentlessly, and watch as they either crumble under the pressure or fight back in ways that only give him more ammunition. It's worked countless times before. Ask Lion Ted Cruz, Sleepy Joe Biden, or crooked Hillary Clinton. But Trump's return to power in 2025 has been different. Emboldened by his victory, armed with the full power of the presidency, and facing a political landscape that's shifted dramatically since 2021, he's been more aggressive, more direct, and more willing to use presidential power to target his opponents. Now, meet Zohran Mamdani. If you haven't heard of him yet, you're about to. Born in Uganda to Pakistani parents, raised in New York, Mamdani is everything Trump typically loves to attack. Young, progressive, articulate, and unafraid to call out power. At 33, Mamdani represents Queens in the New York State Assembly, where he's made a name for himself as a democratic socialist who actually gets things done. Unlike some progressive politicians who are all talk, Mamdani has a track record of passing legislation, building coalitions, and delivering results for his constituents. But what makes Mamdani truly dangerous to someone like Trump isn't just his politics, it's his communication skills. As a former actor and comedian, he knows how to work a room, how to deliver a line, and how to use humor and wit to make devastating political points. He's got the rare combination of policy expertise and performance ability that makes for truly effective political communication. In early 2025, he threw his hat into the ring for one of the biggest political prizes in America, Mayor of New York City. The stage was set for conflict. Trump, fresh off his presidential victory, was looking to flex his political muscles and remind everyone who was in charge. Mamdani, running for mayor of the most important city in America, was building a progressive coalition that directly challenged Trump's vision for the country. But what turned this from a typical political rivalry into a national spectacle was a series of escalating exchanges that began in the most modern of political battlegrounds, social media. It started, as these things often do, with a Trump Truth Social post. In early 2025, as Mamdani's mayoral campaign was gaining momentum, Trump fired off what seemed like a routine attack. Zohran Mamdani is a communist lunatic who wants to destroy New York City. The people of NYC deserve better than this radical socialist who hates America. For most politicians, this would have been the end of the story. You ignore Trump's attacks. You don't engage. You don't give him the attention he craves. That's political communications 101. But Mamdani isn't most politicians. The response that changed everything within hours. Mamdani fired back with a response. That immediately went viral. "Mr. President, I'm flattered you know my name. But if caring about affordable housing, healthcare for all, and good-paying jobs makes me a communist lunatic, then I guess Queens is full of communist lunatics who just want to live with dignity." The response was perfect. It was witty, it was substantive, and it completely reframed Trump's attack. Instead of defending himself against the communist label, he embraced it while simultaneously making it about the real issues that matter to working-class New Yorkers. But more importantly, it showed that Mamdani wasn't intimidated. He wasn't going to hide, he wasn't going to back down, and he wasn't going to let Trump define him. Trump doubles down. Trump's response was predictable. He doesn't like being outmaneuvered, and he especially doesn't like being made to look foolish. So he escalated. "Zohran Mamdani is a dangerous radical who should be investigated. His anti-American views have no place in our government. When I'm president, people like him will be held accountable." The threat was clear. This wasn't just political rhetoric. This was the President of the United States threatening to use his power to target a political opponent. It was the kind of statement that would have been shocking in any other political era, but in the Trump era, it was just Tuesday. The stakes rise, but Mamdani's response showed he understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about whether American democracy could survive a president who was willing to use his power to silence opponents. His response was measured, but firm. Threatening to arrest political opponents is what dictators do, not democratically elected presidents. If standing up for working families makes me dangerous, then I'm proud to be dangerous. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, the most powerful man in America backed by the full weight of the presidency. On the other, a young progressive politician from Queens who refused to be intimidated. The media frenzy. By this point, the Trump-Mamdani exchanges had become a media obsession. Cable news was covering every tweet, every response, every escalation. Social media was exploding with hashtags like #StandWithZohran and #MANIVsTrump. But what made this different from Trump's usual? Twitter wars was the quality of Mamdani's responses. This wasn't just partisan back and forth. Mamdani was using each exchange to make substantive points about policy, about democracy, about what kind of country America wanted to be. The progressive movement rallies, the exchanges had awakened something. In the progressive movement, here was a young politician who wasn't just talking about resistance. He was actually doing it. He was standing up to Trump in real time, and he was winning. Democratic leaders who had been cautious about directly confronting Trump began to rally around Mamdani. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, and other progressive leaders started amplifying his messages. The Working Families Party endorsed his mayoral campaign. Small dollar donations started pouring in from across the country. Trump's frustration grows. Trump was clearly frustrated. His usual tactics weren't working. Mamdani wasn't backing down, wasn't getting defensive, and wasn't making the kinds of mistakes that usually allow Trump to maintain control of the narrative. So Trump did what he always does when he's losing. A fight he escalated further. Zohran Mamdani is a threat to national security. His radical views and anti-American rhetoric are being investigated by the appropriate authorities. The people of New York deserve to know the truth about this dangerous individual. The statement was unprecedented. A sitting president was not just attacking a political opponent, but suggesting that opposing him was a matter of national security. The moment of truth. This was the moment that would define the entire conflict. How would Mamdani respond to a direct threat from the President of the United States? Would he back down? Would he lawyer up? Would he go into hiding? The answer came in the form of a video that would change everything. The live response, rather than tweeting back, Mamdani did something unprecedented. He went live on Instagram, speaking directly to the camera from his campaign headquarters in Queens. The stream quickly went viral, with hundreds of thousands of viewers tuning in to watch this young politician respond to the President of the United States in real time. "Good evening, everyone," Mamdani began, his voice calm but determined. "I want to address what's been happening over the past few days, because I think it's important for all of us to understand what's really going on here." You could feel the tension through the screen. This wasn't a prepared statement or a carefully crafted response. This was raw, unfiltered, and absolutely riveting. The takedown begins. "President Trump has called me a communist lunatic, a dangerous, radical, and now apparently a threat to national security," Mamdani continued. "And you know what? I want to thank him for that, because every time he attacks me, he's really attacking the values that I represent and the values that the people of Queens, the people of New York, and the people of America believe in." The reframe was brilliant. Instead of defending himself against Trump's attacks, he was using them to highlight the contrast between his values and Trump's approach to governance. But then Mamdani did something that completely changed the dynamic. He got personal, not in an attacking way, but in a way that humanized the entire conflict. "Mr. President, let me tell you about the communist lunatics in my district. There's Maria, who works 2 jobs to support her family and can't afford her rent. There's Ahmed, who can't afford his insulin even though he has insurance. There's Jennifer, who's been teaching for 15 years and still can't afford to buy a home in the community where she teaches." The camera stayed tight on Mamdani's face as he spoke, and you could see the genuine emotion in his eyes. This wasn't political theater, this was personal. "These are the people you're calling communist lunatics, Mr. President, people who want affordable health care, good-paying jobs, and the chance to live with dignity. If that makes them dangerous, then I'm proud to be dangerous alongside them." But Mamdani wasn't done. He started pulling out specific policy proposals, explaining in detail how his vision for New York would actually help working families. It was a masterclass in political communication, using Trump's attacks as a launching pad for substantive policy discussion. And then came the moment that would define Mamdani's political career. Looking directly into the camera, he addressed, "The constitutional implications of Trump's threats, Mr. President. You swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. That includes the First Amendment, which protects the right of Americans to speak out against their government. When you threaten to arrest political opponents, you're not just attacking me, you're attacking the very foundation of American democracy." Livestream viewer count was exploding. Comments were flooding in. This wasn't just political theater, this was a constitutional moment. Broadcast lived to the world that Mamdani saved the best for last. In a move that nobody saw coming, he issued a direct challenge to the president. "Mr. President, if you think my ideas are so dangerous, I have a proposal for you. Come to Queens. Come to my district. Meet the people you're calling communist lunatics. Debate me in front of them. Let them decide whose vision for America they prefer." The challenge was unprecedented. A state assembly member challenging the President of the United States to a debate in Queens on live television. "I'll be waiting," Mamdani concluded, staring directly into the camera. The people of New York deserve to hear both sides. The people of America deserve to hear both sides. So come on, Mr. President, let's have that conversation. Within minutes of the live stream ending, social media absolutely exploded. #ComeToQueens became the top trending hashtag on Twitter. TikTok videos of Mamdani's challenge were racking up millions of views. Instagram stories were being shared faster than the platforms could handle. But what was really striking was the diversity of the response. This wasn't just progressives rallying around Mamdani. It was people from across the political spectrum expressing admiration for his courage, his eloquence, and his willingness to stand up to power. Cable news went into overdrive. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Every major network was trying to get Mamdani on the air. The New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal all ran front-page stories about the confrontation, but the real story was in the international coverage. The BBC, Al Jazeera, and other international outlets were covering the story as a symbol of American democracy under strain. A young immigrant's son standing up to the President of the United States had become a global news story. Behind the scenes, the political establishment was scrambling to figure out how to respond. Democratic leaders were trying to balance their support for Mamdani with their concerns about escalating the conflict with Trump. Republican leaders were trying to distance themselves from Trump's most inflammatory rhetoric while not appearing to abandon their party's leader, but the most telling response came from ordinary Americans. Small dollar donations to Mamdani's mayoral campaign spiked. Volunteer signups exploded. People who had never been involved in politics before were suddenly organizing in support of this young politician who had dared to challenge the president. Trump's silence, and then something unprecedented happened. Trump went quiet. For the first time in his political career, he didn't have an immediate response to an attack. His social media accounts, usually a constant stream of posts and reposts, went silent. Political observers speculated about what this meant. Was Trump regrouping? Was he planning a massive counterattack? Or had Mamdani's challenge actually caught him off guard? The confrontation between Trump and Mamdani had raised fundamental questions about American democracy. When a president threatens to arrest political opponents, what does that mean for the rule of law? When a young politician stands up to that threat, what does that mean for political courage? Constitutional scholars began weighing in on the implications of Trump's threats. Legal experts explained the precedents and the potential consequences. The confrontation had moved beyond politics into the realm of constitutional law. What was particularly striking about the confrontation was how it highlighted the generational divide in American politics. Trump, at 78, represented the old approach to political conflict, personal attacks, intimidation, and the use of power to silence opponents. Mamdani, at 33, represented something different, a generation that had grown up with social media, that understood the power of authentic communication, and that was willing to use new platforms and new approaches to challenge traditional power structures. The confrontation also highlighted the changing face of American politics. Here was the son of Pakistani immigrants, representing a diverse district in Queens, standing up to the President of the United States. It was a powerful symbol of how immigration had changed America and how the American dream was still possible for those willing to fight for it. Perhaps most importantly, the confrontation had exposed the class dimensions of American politics. Trump's attacks on Mamdani weren't just personal, they were attacks on the working class communities that Mamdani represented. His response had reframed the entire conflict in terms of economic justice and class solidarity. The confrontation had energized the progressive movement in ways that nobody had expected. Mamdani's willingness to stand up to Trump had inspired other progressive politicians to be more aggressive in their challenges to the administration. Across the country, progressive candidates began adopting Mamdani's approach, substantive policy discussion, combined with fearless confrontation of power. The Mamdani model became a template for progressive politics. The confrontation had also completely transformed the New York mayoral race. Mamdani, who had been a long-shot candidate, suddenly became the frontrunner. His fundraising exploded. His poll numbers soared, and endorsements began pouring in from across the progressive spectrum. But more importantly, the race had become a national referendum on Trump's approach to governance. A Mamdani victory would be seen as a repudiation of Trump's attacks and a validation of progressive values. Political observers began speculating about what the confrontation meant for national politics. If Mamdani could successfully challenge Trump and win, what did that mean for other politicians? Could his approach be replicated in other races in other states? The confrontation had shown that Trump wasn't invincible, that his attacks could be turned against him, and that courage and authenticity could still triumph over intimidation and bluster. Behind the scenes, Republican leaders were dealing with their own problems. Trump's attacks on Mamdani had highlighted everything that many Republicans found problematic about his approach to politics: the personal attacks, the constitutional concerns, the authoritarian tendencies. Some Republican politicians began to distance themselves from Trump's most inflammatory rhetoric. Others used the moment to call for a return to more traditional conservative values. The confrontation had created fissures within the Republican Party that would have lasting consequences. One of the most interesting aspects of the confrontation was how it was received by younger audiences. Gen Z and millennial viewers didn't just watch the political theater, they turned it into a cultural phenomenon. The challenge, "Come to Queens," became a meme, a rallying cry, a symbol of standing up to power. TikTok users created videos explaining the constitutional implications of the confrontation. Instagram accounts dedicated to civic engagement saw their followers explode. Celebrities began weighing in on the confrontation, with many expressing support for Mamdani's courage and his message. Musicians, actors, and athletes used their platforms to amplify his challenge to Trump and to encourage voter registration in New York. But what was particularly striking was how the celebrity response focused on the substance of Mamdani's message, rather than just the spectacle of the confrontation. The cultural conversation had elevated beyond mere entertainment to serious discussion of democratic values. The confrontation had also captured international attention in ways that few American political moments do. International observers saw in Mamdani's challenge a symbol of American democracy's resilience, a reminder that the system could still produce leaders willing to stand up to authoritarianism. Foreign newspapers ran editorials about the confrontation. International students studying in America wrote about what the moment meant for their understanding of American politics. The confrontation had become a global symbol of democratic resistance. For Mamdani, the confrontation had transformed his political career overnight. He had gone from a relatively unknown state assembly member to a national political figure with a massive platform and unlimited potential. But the confrontation had also raised the stakes for his political future. Success in the mayoral race would validate his approach and potentially launch him toward higher office. Failure might be seen as a rejection of his confrontational style and his progressive message. Trump's response to the confrontation, or rather his lack of response, suggested that even he recognized the political damage that the exchange had caused. His threats had backfired, his attacks had been turned against him, and his usual tactics had proven ineffective. The confrontation had shown the limits of Trump's power and the potential for effective resistance to his approach to politics. The confrontation had also implications for the Democratic Party as a whole. Mamdani's success had shown that progressive politicians could be both principled and effective, that they could stand up to Trump without compromising their values. Other Democratic politicians began to adopt elements of Mamdani's approach. The combination of substantive policy discussion with fearless confrontation of power. The party was evolving, becoming more willing to engage in direct conflict with Trump and more confident in progressive values. Perhaps most importantly, the confrontation had established important precedents for the defense of democratic values. Mamdani's challenge to Trump's threats had shown that the Constitution could still be defended, that American democracy could still produce leaders willing to stand up to authoritarianism. The confrontation would be studied in law schools, referenced in constitutional debates, and remembered as a moment when American democracy proved its resilience. The most obvious lesson from the confrontation was that courage is contagious. Mamdani's willingness to stand up to Trump had inspired others to be more courageous in their own political engagement. The confrontation had shown that even the most powerful person in the world could be challenged effectively. The confrontation had also demonstrated the power of authenticity over performance. While Trump's attacks were calculated for maximum attention, Mamdani's responses were genuine, substantive, and connected to real policy concerns. The public had responded to that authenticity. Perhaps most importantly, the confrontation had reminded Americans that democracy requires active participation. It's not enough to complain about political leaders. Citizens need to support those who are willing to stand up for democratic values. The massive response to Mamdani's challenge had shown that Americans were ready to engage, ready to participate, ready to defend their democratic institutions. Conclusion: the moment that changed everything. 26 minutes and 0 seconds to 27 minutes and 0 seconds. The confrontation between Donald Trump and Zohran Mamdani was more than just a political spat. It was a defining moment for American democracy. It showed that even in an era of authoritarian threats, even when facing the full power of the presidency, courage and principle could still triumph. Mamdani's challenge to Trump, "Come to Queens," had become a symbol of democratic resistance, a reminder that in America, any citizen can stand up to power and demand accountability. The confrontation had shown a path forward for American politics, one based on courage, authenticity, and genuine commitment to democratic values. It had demonstrated that progressive politics could be both principled and effective, that young leaders could challenge established power, and that the American people were ready for a new kind of political leadership. Whether this moment represents a temporary shift or a permanent change in American political culture remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: Zohran Mamdani's response to Donald Trump's threats showed that American democracy still has the capacity to produce leaders willing to stand up for what's right. And in an era when that capacity is constantly being tested, that might be the most important lesson of all. So what do you think? Did Mamdani's challenge to Trump represent a turning point in American politics? Or was it just another moment in our ongoing political drama? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the political moments that are shaping our democracy.